There is a Swiss movement that sits inside a watch you can buy for around $250. The exact same movement by the same maker also sits inside watches that have sold for close to $10,000. Not a similar movement, not a cousin, the same family of caliber, made on the same machines in the same Swiss valleys. The price moved by a factor that defies any engineering explanation. The engine inside it barely moved at all. That is the contradiction this video is built around. And by the end of it, you will be able to look at almost any Swiss watch under a few $1,000s and estimate with real confidence how much of its price is metal and mechanism and how much is theater. You will know which premiums are earned, you will know which ones are simply charged, and you will know the one question that collapses most of the illusion in a single sentence. But first, the obvious objection. If the movement is the same, why does anyone pay more? Hold that thought. The answer is more interesting than people are stupid, and we will get to it. The real weakness of an expensive watch is rarely the one buyers expect. Let's start with why the conventional story feels so convincing. When you spend more on most products, you usually get more. A more expensive car is faster or safer. A more expensive laptop is quicker. So when a watch costs 4 times as much, the brain assumes 4 times the watch. The industry does nothing to correct this. It speaks in the language of heritage, of manufacture, of craftsmanship, and lets you fill in the rest. The assumption does the selling. Now, the benchmark. Consider the movement at the center of all this. For decades, the workhorse of the Swiss industry was a caliber called the ETA 2824. It is automatic, meaning it winds itself from the motion of your wrist. It runs at 4 Hz, which is a smooth, modern beat. It holds roughly 38 hours of power when you take it off. It hacks, meaning the second's hand stops when you pull the crown so you can set it precisely. It is reliable, repairable, and understood by every competent watchmaker on Earth. None of that is marketing. That is genuinely a good movement, and it deserves respect. Here is what that respect does not buy you: exclusivity. ETA is owned by the Swatch Group, the largest watch conglomerate in Switzerland. For most of the last century, ETA supplied that 2,884 to a huge share of the industry. Brands you think of as rivals were all buying the same engine and dressing it differently. Then, in the early 2000s, ETA announced it would stop selling freely to outsiders to pull supply inside its own group. That single decision is the hinge of this entire story. Because into that gap stepped a company called Sellita. Sellita had spent years assembling movements for ETA, so it knew the 2080-24 intimately. When the key patents expired, it simply built its own version, the SW200. Same dimensions, same beat rate, same automatic winding. Close enough that a watchmaker can often drop it into a case designed for the ETA without redesigning anything. Think of it the way you think of a generic medicine after the patent runs out. Same active ingredient, different label, lower friction to obtain. Today, that Sellita caliber powers watches from Tudor, TAG Heuer, Oris, Christopher Ward, Sin, and a long list of others, sitting at price points from a few $100s to several thousand. So now you have 2 near-identical movements freely available across the industry, and the watches built around them range from roughly $250 to figures with an extra 0 on the end. That spread is the thing to explain. And the honest explanation has 3 parts. A part that is real, a part that is fair, and a part that is pure pricing power. Let me make this concrete with a family you can actually shop. The Swatch Group owns ETA, and it also owns a stack of brands that all draw from the same movement shelf. Tissot, Hamilton, Mito, Certina, Rado. They share, in various forms, the same modern caliber, often called the Powermatic 80, itself an upgraded descendant of that 2884 retuned to hold 80 hours of power instead of 38, with an anti-magnetic Nivacron hairspring. 80 hours matters in real life. Take the watch off Friday night, pick it up Monday morning, and it is still running and still on time. That is a genuine upgrade you can feel. Now, watch the prices move while the engine stays put. The TSA PRX Powermatic 80 launched at around $650. The Hamilton Cocky Field, with essentially the same movement under a Hamilton name, sits higher. Recent steel models around 730 Swiss francs, and Hamilton's Power Reserve pieces above $1,000. A Mito, or a Hamilton Murph, lands around the $1,000 mark. Same group, same movement architecture. The number on the tag is being set by the name on the dial and the story behind it, not by the mechanism keeping time. And that is still inside one company. Step outside it to brands with grander heritage, and the same basic Sellita or ETA caliber can carry a watch into the multiple thousands. This is the moment to hand you something you can actually use. Because once you see the pattern, you need a way to act on it, in a store or on a website, in real time, before the romance takes over. Here is the framework. 4 questions. Ask them in order, and the fog clears. Question 1. What movement is inside, and is it shared? If the answer is a stock ETA or Sellita caliber, you are paying for everything around the movement, not the movement itself. That is not automatically a bad deal, but it tells you where to look next. Question 2. What does the brand actually do to that movement? Houses an ETA caliber and modifies refinishes and chronometer certifies that caliber are very different sentences at the same price. Chronometer certification, the COSC standard, means the movement was independently tested to keep time within a tight daily window. That is a real, measurable thing you are paying for. Decoration you will never see through a closed caseback is not. Question 3. What am I paying for that I can measure versus what I am paying for that I can only feel? Case material, water resistance, crystal type, bracelet construction, certification, measurable. Heritage, exclusivity, the feeling of the name. Real, but emotional. Neither is wrong to want. You just deserve to know the ratio. Question 4, and this is the one that does the most work. If 2 watches share a movement, what does the more expensive one give me that the cheaper one does not? Force the answer into concrete nouns. Better finishing you can inspect. A denser, better engineered bracelet. A real service network. Stronger resale. If the honest answer is only the name, then you have found the premium that is pure pricing power, and you can decide, clear-eyed, whether the name is worth it to you. Sometimes it is. That is allowed. Now, the strongest version of the reveal. The detail that makes the whole thing click is servicing. The cheaper Swatch Group movements are often laser regulated at the factory and, in their most basic form, are not designed to be re-regulated the way an old movement was. Some are treated as near disposable, meant to be swapped rather than lovingly rebuilt. Meanwhile, a more expensive watch with a properly serviceable, higher-grade version of the same caliber can be maintained for decades. So occasionally the premium buys something genuinely real. Not a different engine, but a different relationship with time and repair. The trap is assuming you are getting that every time you pay more. Often you are not, which brings us to the fair argument against everything I have just said. Let me make it as strongly as I can, because a one-sided case is a weak one. The movement is not the whole watch. Finishing the case to a high standard, sharp bevels, the interplay of brushed and polished surfaces takes real skill and real cost, and it is visible on the wrist every day. A heavy, well-articulated bracelet with a solid clasp is engineering you feel hourly. Heritage is not nothing. A brand that genuinely shaped watchmaking history is selling something a year-old micro-brand simply cannot manufacture. Exclusivity has a market value, whether or not it has an engineering value. A real global service network is worth paying for. And resale matters. A watch that holds its value is partly an asset, not only a cost. All of that is true. All of that can legitimately justify some of the premium. So how much? Here is the honest verdict. A reasonable premium for genuine case finishing, a better bracelet, certification, and a real service network is defensible. Often that is a meaningful step up over the bare bones version, and worth it for a watch you will own for decades. What is not defensible is the leap from there to many multiples of the price for the same caliber, justified by nothing you can hold, measure, or service. That gap is not engineering. It is positioning. And positioning is exactly what the industry would prefer you not separate out. If you value comparisons built from movements, prices, and verifiable specs instead of logos and lighting, this is the channel for that. Subscribing tells the algorithm to send you more of it. So let's return to where we started. One movement, a price that moves by a factor of 40 while the mechanism barely changes. What does the expensive watch genuinely give you? Sometimes better finishing you can see, a better bracelet you can feel, certification you can verify, and a service network that keeps it alive for life. What does the affordable one give you? The same fundamental timekeeping, often 80 hours of reserve, real Swiss build, and the money you did not spend. The measurable part of the premium is the finishing, the bracelet, the certification, and the servicing. The rest, and on the most expensive end, it is most of it, is heritage, exclusivity, and feeling. None of that makes the premium fraud. A name can be worth real money to the person wearing it, but you should be the one deciding that the name is worth it, with full sight of what it costs and what it does not buy. The watch keeps the same time on every wrist. The only thing that changes is how much you knew when you reached for your wallet. Next, the watches that do the opposite. The ones quietly worth far more than their price, where the dial name is costing you nothing and the engineering is costing you everything. That is the inverse of this story, and it is where the real value hides.